Hey, what's up, AP World? APUSH review, the New Deal on the docket for you today. So much to know about the New Deal, guaranteed to be on the APUSH exam in some way, shape, or form. I will try to walk you through every single thing that you need to know and explain it for you. Let's get started. Lots to cover. All right, when FDR becomes president, there is a banking problem, and roughly 1/4 of banks failed prior to FDR becoming president. Welcome to the presidency. 25% of the banks have failed. People are losing their money. So one of the first things he does is declare a bank holiday, and this closes banks for several days. It institutes a cooling off period, let everybody relax so people aren't running to the bank and taking all their money out. Congress also passes it within the first couple days of him being in office, the Emergency Banking Relief Act, which allowed the president to reopen good banks and monitor transactions to hopefully avoid another banking problem. He also used something called fireside chats. He ends up doing about 30 of these in his career, but the first one was a radio address to help restore public faith in banks, basically telling people, relax, your money's safe, we're not going to let these banks fail, please have faith in the banking system. Okay, 3 R's you need to know with FDR, and this is a part of his New Deal. First one is relief, and he wanted to provide jobs and help end suffering for people. Recovery, he hoped to help improve the economy. In reform, he wanted to change the economy, and he wanted to prevent another depression from occurring. And some of these reforms actually permanently changed the economy. Now, I'm going to start talking about a bunch of different programs known as his alphabet soup. Some of these I may say are relief, when you could argue that they are reform or recovery. That's fine. Some of these actually fit into more than one of these categories, okay? I will do my best to pigeonhole them into a specific one, but if you disagree, that's totally fine. It's not set in stone which one they fall under. Just keep these ideas in mind. Okay, we're going to talk about 2 New Deals. The first one is from 1933 to 1935. This is the first 2 years that FDR is in office, and primarily he wanted to focus on relief and recovery, putting people to work. Unemployment during the Great Depression at its height when he comes in is about 25%. 1 out of 4 people, he wanted to get them to work. The second New Deal lasts from 1935 to 38, and this focuses more on reforms, so long-term fixes to the economy. And this absolutely changes the role of the government in the economy. Okay, here I'm going to throw a bunch of programs at you that put people to work and were forms of relief. First one, the PWA, or the Public Works Administration. This provided $4 billion to state governments to build schools, roads, improving highways, etc. This didn't work as well as he had hoped, mostly because it wasn't enough money and it took too long to get it out there. So this doesn't last long. The CCC is huge. You need to know the CCC virtually above any other alphabet soup agency. These are young men, 18 to 24, who did a whole bunch of work, reforestation, firefighting, anything to do in the wilderness. And the condition was these workers had to send a portion of their income back to their families. So they're put to work, which will decrease the unemployment rate, and some of their money goes back to their families to help them out back at home. This employs almost 3 million people. It's a huge, huge number. And again, they did environmental work, planting trees, building parks, reforestation, firefighting, you name it outdoors, they probably did it. Tennessee Valley Authority is another huge one, the TVA. See Tennessee down here, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, West Virginia. The goal of this was to reform the utility power in Tennessee. So the government actually takes a role in this. So the government becomes involved in the hydroelectric industry, and they begin to build dams to help provide jobs and hydroelectric power to people in the surrounding area. So if you were in this blue area here, you benefited from the TVA. This provided countless jobs and cheap electricity to people living there. The WPA is very similar to the PWA, the Works Progress Administration. This comes a little bit later, and it's on a much, much larger scale. It employed 9 million workers, and they built roads, bridges, buildings, etc. And this is absolutely huge, puts lots of people to work. And at one time, 40% of the nation's employees worked with the WPA. That's a huge number. All right, some recovery programs. The AAA, or the Agricultural Adjustment Act, sought to remedy the problem of the overproduction of crops by farmers. If you remember, during the 1920s, farmers kept producing more and more crops. That caused the price to go down. So the government wanted to help them out with the prices. So they essentially paid farmers not to grow crops. So the surpluses would come down, crop prices would go back up. Supreme Court doesn't like this, and they overturned it in a very famous court case, Butler versus the U.S. No, the AAA Know that it paid farmers not to grow. Know that it was overturned by Butler versus U.S. The NIRA, or the National Industrial Recovery Act, creates the NRA, which allows the president to set codes for industry, such as prices, working hours, etc. Section 7A of this act allowed unions to collectively bargain, and this is declared unconstitutional in a very famous court case again, Schechter Poultry versus the United States. So the NRA and the AAA were both declared unconstitutional. And this is going to get FDR furious. All right, some reform programs changing the economy, changing the government role in the economy. Social Security. This provided unemployment insurance and also pensions for retired workers, for elderly people. The Wagner Act is probably the most important act ever passed for labor unions. This is a huge boost to unions. It allows them to collectively bargain. The Wagner Act is needed to be passed because the NRA, in that Section 7A, which said that unions could collectively bargain, is thrown out because of Schechter Poultry versus the U.S. So the Wagner Act is passed, and the unions love this. This inspires the CIO, which is a labor union of unskilled workers, and John L. Lewis is the leader of this, and he has his workers at GM in Flint, Michigan go on strike. They lock themselves in the plant, and this is called a sit-down strike, and here they are on strike. That never would have happened if it weren't for the Wagner Act. The FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, is used to address the banking issue. So it guaranteed bank deposits of up to $5,000, and this really helped restore faith in banks. So if you have $4,999.99 in a bank, and that bank fails because everybody goes to take their money out, the FDIC would ensure that money. It is safe. You will get that money back even if the bank fails. The SEC is the Securities and Exchange Commission, which sought to protect the stock market from fraud. So it makes it less like a gambling place and more like it should be, investing in businesses. Core packing plan is probably FDR's biggest mistake, and he does this in reaction to 7 out of 9 of his New Deal programs being thrown out or declared unconstitutional. So he sought to influence the Supreme Court, which would change the separation of powers and checks and balances in the United States. So he had his plan. For every judge that is over 70, remember, judges are appointed for life. It is until they die or until they retire. And he didn't like that there were so many old judges. So he said for every judge over 70 that does not retire, he should be able to appoint a new one. And here it is, the old 9 men on the bench, Supreme Court, 9. 6 of them are over 70. This would allow him to appoint up to 6 new judges. He proposes this. This is a public relations nightmare for him. It never happens due to public and the government outcry. People in his own party turn on him, telling him he's crazy, he needs to settle down. There's this fear of FDR being a dictator. A lot of people already call him a dictator because of involvement in the government economy. You're doing that, then you're going to upset checks and balances. You're one step away from a dictator, is what critics would say. Couple key people from the 1930s you need to know. Huey Long was from Louisiana. He proposed to give every family $5,000 by taxing the wealthy. That was his way to deal with the Great Depression. Dr. Francis Townsend favored giving $200 per month to senior citizens. That sounds an awful lot like Social Security. FDR creates that. Father Charles Coughlin used to be a New Deal supporter in the beginning. Then he turned a critic. He was upset with FDR. He thought he should have nationalized the banks and taken a larger role. And then John Maynard Keynes, holy cow, is this guy important. He was an economist that influenced FDR. He said the way to get out of the Great Depression was that the government should run a deficit to improve the economy. The government should purposely spend more money than it takes in. That's called prime pumping. And this will influence a lot of future presidents as well. Let's take a look at this. Was the New Deal good or bad? If you have to write an essay about it, you will have to say whether it is effective or ineffective. Well, if you want to say it's good, here are your arguments. It restored faith and optimism in many Americans. It provided millions of jobs. Some programs are still around today, like Social Security, FDIC, FHA, which I didn't mention, which is the Federal Housing Administration, which provides mortgages. If you want to say it's bad, that it wasn't effective, you can do that as well. You could say that it increased the power of the federal government, perhaps too much for one's liking. High unemployment persisted. This lasted for a very long time. It wasn't the New Deal that ended the Great Depression. It was World War II that did. All right, that is pretty much everything you need to know about the New Deal. Hopefully, I reinforced some key ideas for you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Please subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Spread the word. And I want to show you in my hometown right now, Buffalo, New York. This is where the Sabres used to play. It's called the Memorial Auditorium. It actually got tore down a couple years ago. But this was one of the last WPA projects from the New Deal era, built in the late 1930s. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Have a good day, guys.